Her beloved garden, bursting with vibrant sunflowers and delicate tulips, suddenly became a target. The HOA, led by the arrogant and unyielding Patricia, claimed her flowers were ruining the neighborhood aesthetic and slapped her with a $10,000 fine. "Rules are rules," Patricia said smugly, confident no one would dare challenge her authority. But what she didn't know was that Emily was ready to fight back. This battle would soon unravel into a scandal that shook the entire community. And it all started with one letter. Emily Daniels had always dreamed of a place to call her own, a safe haven where she and her son Jake could build memories and escape the chaos of the world. That dream became a reality when she moved into her charming new home in Meadowbrook Pines. The neighborhood was a picture of suburban bliss, tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and friendly neighbors waving hello as they passed by. But what truly made the house special was the garden. It wasn't just a patch of dirt, it was Emily's sanctuary. Every sunflower, daisy, and tulip, planted in neat yet lively arrangements, was a testament to her love for nature and the hours she and Jake spent together under the sun. It was more than a garden, it was a labor of love. One crisp Saturday morning, Emily was out in her garden, humming softly as she watered her flowers. Jake darted around, chasing butterflies, laughing without a care in the world. The sight of him against the backdrop of their colorful garden filled her with pride. Everything felt perfect, that is, until the mail arrived. Among the usual bills and circulars was a letter with the unmistakable HOA logo stamped on the envelope. Curious, Emily opened it right there on the porch. Her stomach dropped as she read the bold, impersonal words. "Your property is in violation of HOA landscaping guidelines. Failure to comply will result in a $10,000 fine." The letter went on to state that her flowers, her beloved flowers, were not in line with the approved aesthetic of the community. Approved aesthetic? Emily furrowed her brow. She had meticulously reviewed the HOA rules before moving in, and there had been no mention of flower restrictions. Confusion quickly turned to frustration. The letter was signed by Patricia Lawson, the HOA president, whose name was already whispered with disdain among the neighbors. Patricia had a reputation for wielding her position like a badge of unchecked power, micromanaging everything from mailbox colors to holiday decorations. Emily had never had a direct encounter with Patricia, but she had heard enough to know this wouldn't be a friendly conversation. Emily sat on the edge of her porch steps, letter in hand, as Jake ran over with a flower he had just picked. "Look, Mom, this one's perfect," he said, holding up a tulip, its petals glowing in the morning light. She smiled faintly at him, hiding her growing frustration. How could something so innocent and beautiful be deemed a violation? That evening, Emily pored over the HOA rulebook with a cup of tea in hand. She read every clause, every footnote, but there was nothing, absolutely nothing, about flowers being restricted. "Something isn't right," she muttered, her frustration simmering into determination. She wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Patricia Lawson, uproot her sanctuary without a fight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily stood by the garden with a new sense of resolve. If Patricia thought she could bulldoze her way into people's lives unchecked, she was in for a rude awakening. Emily didn't know it yet, but this garden dispute was about to uncover far more than unauthorized flowers. It was the beginning of a battle for her home, her rights, and her peace of mind. The community center was abuzz with chatter as Emily walked in, clutching the HOA letter in her hand like a piece of incriminating evidence. The room was a mixture of sterile fluorescent lighting and an air of strained politeness, where neighbors smiled awkwardly but avoided eye contact for too long. At the center of it all sat Patricia Lawson, impeccably dressed in a blazer that practically screamed authority. In front of her was a thick binder, a physical manifestation of her control, perched smugly on the table as if it held the answers to every question, though Emily suspected it only created more. Emily took a seat near the front, determined to address the issue directly. She scanned the room and noticed a few supportive nods from neighbors she had exchanged pleasantries with before. It gave her a flicker of courage, though Patricia's sharp gaze quickly snuffed it out. Patricia called the meeting to order with a curt tone, her voice carrying an edge of irritation, as if even this routine event was beneath her. After the usual updates about streetlights and lawn maintenance, Emily raised her hand. Patricia barely looked up. "Yes, Miss Daniels?" she said, her tone clipped. Emily stood, steadying her voice. I received a letter about my garden being in violation of HOA rules, with a fine of $10,000. I've reviewed the guidelines, and I can't find anything about flowers being restricted. Can you clarify which rule I've broken? Patricia's lips curved into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's about maintaining property values, she said smoothly. Your garden... Well, it looks a bit chaotic compared to the uniform appearance we strive for in this community. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. Chaotic? They're flowers, not construction debris. How exactly do they lower property values? A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. A few residents nodded in agreement, and one even clapped softly before stopping under Patricia's glare. Sensing her authority being questioned, Patricia leaned forward, her fingers tapping the edge of her binder. We have standards for a reason, Miss Daniels. If everyone planted whatever they wanted, this neighborhood would look like a patchwork quilt. We're simply protecting the investment of all homeowners. Emily refused to back down. Then show me where in the rules it says flowers aren't allowed. Patricia's smile faltered for a moment before she flipped open her binder, the pages rustling dramatically. It's under landscaping, she said vaguely, scanning the pages without actually stopping on any particular section. After an awkward pause, she shut the binder with a snap. We'll discuss this further later, she said, her tone final. Meeting adjourned. The room fell silent as Patricia stood, clearly signaling that the conversation was over. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but Patricia was already gathering her things, dismissing her with an air of practiced indifference. The meeting dissolved into whispers as residents exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others wary of getting involved. Emily left the room, her frustration bubbling over. As she stepped into the cool evening air, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia was hiding something. The binder, the vague explanations, the hasty adjournment, it all felt calculated. She wasn't just fighting for her flowers anymore. She was standing up to something bigger, something that reeked of manipulation and abuse of power. Emily clenched her fists, her determination hardening. If Patricia thought she could silence her with vague threats and evasions, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Emily sat at her dining table late into the night, a steaming mug of tea beside her, and the HOA rulebook spread out like a map to hidden treasures. Jake sat across from her, flipping through pages with the enthusiasm of a kid on a scavenger hunt. Mom, this doesn't make any sense, he said, holding up a section on landscaping that was as vague as a cloudy sky. They don't even say what counts as a violation. Emily leaned back, rubbing her temples. Exactly. They're making it up as they go. But why? What's the end game? Her voice was steady, but her frustration was bubbling just beneath the surface. She knew Patricia wasn't just targeting her for fun. There had to be a reason, a pattern. It didn't take long for them to find it. Emily noticed small but suspiciously frequent changes in the bylaws, all signed and dated by Patricia alone. The amendments seemed harmless at first glance, adjustments to landscaping standards, revisions to parking regulations. But a deeper dive revealed something far more insidious. None of these changes had been voted on by the community as required by HOA regulations. Patricia had been amending the rules in secret, turning them into tools of control. Emily's heart raced as she pieced it together. This wasn't about her flowers. It was about power. Fueled by a mix of indignation and determination, Emily expanded her search. She requested public records of HOA finances and noticed something even more alarming. Large sums of money marked as landscaping fines, but funneled into vague expenses like beautification projects. A little cross-referencing revealed that these projects just so happened to align with recent upgrades to Patricia's property, a new fence, a freshly paved driveway, and even a backyard gazebo. Emily knew she couldn't do this alone. The next morning, she walked over to her neighbor Tom's house. Tom was a retired lawyer with a reputation for being sharp as a tack and unafraid of confrontation. He welcomed her in with a warm smile and a knowing look, as though he'd been expecting this moment. Let me guess, he said, setting down a cup of coffee for her. You've run afoul of the HOA queen. Emily nodded, laying out the documents she had gathered. Tom, I think she's been misusing HOA funds and rewriting rules without proper votes. This isn't just about me, it's about everyone. Tom's expression darkened as he flipped out through the papers. This is bad, Emily. but it's also actionable. If we can prove this, she won't just lose her position, she could face serious consequences. Together, they formed a plan. Emily and Jake spent the next week interviewing neighbors, many of whom shared stories of unjust fines and questionable HOA practices. Tom drafted a formal request for an independent audit of the HOA's finances, citing Emily's findings. They also gathered photographic evidence of Patricia's home upgrades, cross-referenced with the suspicious expenses in the HOA ledger. When the formal request was submitted, Patricia's reaction was immediate and telling. The usually composed president appeared visibly rattled at the next HOA meeting, her veneer of confidence cracking like a fragile mask. She stammered through routine updates, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The other board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware of the brewing storm. It wasn't long before whispers spread through the neighborhood. Residents began asking questions, and Patricia's once loyal allies started distancing themselves. For the first time in years, her authority seemed to falter. Emily watched from the sidelines, a small but triumphant smile on her face. She wasn't just fighting for her garden anymore, she was fighting for the integrity of her community. The tide was beginning to turn, and Emily was ready to see it through. Emily's patience had officially run out. When the second letter arrived, a fine for non-compliant fencing, accusing her of using materials that didn't match the HOA's arbitrary standards, she knew it was a calculated move by Patricia. It wasn't about fences, flowers, or community aesthetics anymore. It was about control, and Patricia wasn't going to let her authority be challenged without a fight. Emily, however, was done playing by Patricia's rules. It was time to take this to court. Sitting in Tom's cozy living room, surrounded by stacks of documents and legal books, Emily felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. Tom, ever the calm and collected strategist, walked her through the next steps. We're filing a lawsuit for unjust fines, lack of transparency, and misuse of funds. Patricia's behavior isn't just unethical, it's illegal, he explained, sliding a thick packet of papers across the table. This is our chance to hold her accountable. The day of the trial arrived quickly, bringing with it an electric tension that filled the courthouse like a storm about to break. Emily sat at the plaintiff's table, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. Patricia entered the room, her usual air of superiority slightly diminished. Her confident stride faltered as she caught sight of the evidence Emily and Tom had meticulously prepared. The binder she clutched now seemed more like a shield than a weapon. The proceedings began, and Patricia's attorney wasted no time presenting fabricated documents that supposedly showed Emily's agreement to remove her flowers. Emily couldn't help but feel a flash of anger as she listened to the lies, but she stayed composed, knowing her moment was coming. When her turn arrived, she stepped forward with the original HOA agreements, pointing out the glaring discrepancies between her authentic documents and Patricia's altered versions. The courtroom grew silent as Emily detailed the unauthorized bylaw amendments, presenting dates, signatures, and records that exposed Patricia's unchecked power grabs. But the real turning point came when Tom called the HOA treasurer to the stand. The room held its collective breath as he hesitated, shifting uncomfortably under the judge's stern gaze. Finally, he confessed. Patricia had pressured him into altering financial records to cover up fines that were funneled into her personal projects. The admission sent a ripple of shock through the courtroom. Patricia's composure crumbled, her carefully constructed facade of authority shattered as the weight of her actions came crashing down. She stammered out weak defenses, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge didn't hold back. In a firm but measured tone, the judge ruled in Emily's favor, invalidating the fines and ordering Patricia to step down as HOA president immediately. The HOA itself was also required to refund improperly collected fines to several residents, a decision that drew a collective sigh of relief from the community members present. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, relief, pride, and a renewed sense of justice. As Patricia slumped in her chair, visibly defeated, Emily stood tall. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was a stand for fairness and accountability. She glanced over at Tom, who gave her a small nod, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The battle had been long and grueling, but they had won. As Emily stepped out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunlight, she took a deep breath, letting the weight of the fight fall away. Her garden was safe, her name was cleared, and Patricia's reign was over. The neighborhood would finally have a chance to heal, and Emily's story would stand as a reminder that even the most intimidating bullies can't stand up to the truth. With Patricia gone, it felt as if a heavy cloud had lifted over the neighborhood. The air seemed fresher, the streets livelier, and for the first time in years, the residents of Meadowbrook Pines began to reclaim their community. Emily, standing on her porch with a cup of coffee, watched as neighbors gathered near the community center for the first HOA meeting under new leadership. She felt a mix of relief and pride. This was the fresh start everyone deserved. The meeting had a different tone entirely. Instead of Patricia's dominating presence and cold bureaucratic jargon, the new president, a warm and approachable woman named Linda, welcomed everyone with an open discussion. "This neighborhood should feel like home, not a set of rules you're afraid to break," Linda said, her voice steady but kind. The room erupted in applause, and Emily couldn't help but smile. It was a far cry from the hostile gatherings Patricia had orchestrated. The residents wasted no time brainstorming ways to improve their community. They voted to remove arbitrary landscaping fines, implement transparent financial practices, and create a committee that focused on fostering relationships rather than enforcing rigid standards. Emily was even asked to join the committee, a testament to how much her fight had inspired others. Emily's garden became an unspoken symbol of resilience. The bright sunflowers that lined her fence seemed to stand taller, their golden faces turned confidently toward the sun. Inspired by her victory, other residents began adding personal touches to their own homes: whimsical wind chimes, colorful flower beds, and even a few small vegetable gardens. What once felt like a sterile, cookie-cutter neighborhood was transforming into a vibrant tapestry of individuality and community spirit. But not everyone embraced the change. Patricia, now stripped of her title and reputation, quietly sold her house and moved away. It wasn't a dramatic exit, no tearful goodbyes or fiery confrontations, just the quiet disappearance of someone who had wielded too much power for too long. Her departure left behind a sense of relief, as if the final chapter of a long and difficult story had been written. For Emily, the victory was more than just about her flowers. It was a lesson in standing up for what was right, even when the odds seemed stacked against her. She had gone from feeling isolated and powerless to being a leader in her community. And every time she walked past her garden, the vibrant blooms seemed to whisper a reminder. Freedom isn't just about fighting back, it's about thriving afterward. One sunny afternoon, Emily and Jake planted new flowers together, bright marigolds and lavender this time, their hands dirty but their spirits light. Jake looked up at his mom and grinned. "Our garden's the best one here, you know." Emily laughed, her heart full. "It's not just ours, Jake. It's for everyone, and it always will be." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over their little corner of the world, Emily stood back and admired their work. The garden wasn't just beautiful, it was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, something wonderful could grow.